So, hi, we've got Lucianne Gerrard here today to tell us about her healing journey. So, welcome, first of all.
Thank you. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. So, I'm really interested to hear your story, and I want to go through your timeline in detail. So, taking a look at your life before you became ill, the story of your diagnosis experience, and then I want to hear all about your healing journey up until now. Um, so if we go back in time a bit then, can you give us the gist of your childhood and kind of what was happening in your life in the years, maybe months leading up to your illness?
Yeah. So I'd had I think I've had quite a strict upbringing. My mum was particularly strict. So I was quite, nervous. I wasn't nervous, but I was just always on edge, looking out for the next drama. So that kind of has played a big part in my life. And then, like I say, when I came back to Scotland after being abroad, so I left my partner over there and his family and my good friends, and came back to Scotland. And that was really when I noticed that things were not right. Also my dad had been ill, my mum had had cancer. There was rubbish every angle I looked. It was all not good.
So a lot of stress all happening at once by the
Very
sounds
much.
of it.
Yes.
So was it quite stressful coming back to Scotland after having spent quite a long time living in Spain, was it you said?
Yeah, well, yep, yes. It was very stressful. And of course I'd left to go and never come back. But of course then the way things turned out, I did go back. It was really hard. And of course all the stuff that I'd left Scotland for, of course the second I returned it was all back the same. So there was still all the drama with mum and problems with dad and everything.
And when did you first notice some symptoms? When did you kind of get a sense that, or when did you were you first aware of something being wrong with your health?
Yeah. So, I returned in 2004, and it was really in that first year where my left arm was a bit funny. I remember it being, I could move it, but I couldn't feel it. So it was totally numb. It was like carrying a big lump of meat around with me, my arm. It was just heavy, heavy, but it could move. If I'd sawed it off, I wouldn't have felt a thing, basically.
Oh,
Yeah, it
right.
was really odd. But I did go to the doctor then, and I think he just basically said, just keep an eye on it. If it gets any worse, then come back. But it didn't. It did actually get better again. So I just continued, and that was all fine.
Okay. And then when did you eventually go to see your GP again when what symptoms came back or didn't go away?
Yeah, well, that was the thing, because that was in 2004, and then it was a year later, effectively, in 2005. That was when my leg was really, really heavy, my left leg, and then my left arm was also getting a bit heavy. So that was when I went to the GP, and said, "There's something not right here,"
And were you referred at that point?
Yeah, well, I remember the doctor, she was very nice. She just told me to go home, pack for a few days or something in hospital. She said, I'm sending an ambulance right now. So I literally went home, packed a few things. The ambulance came and took me in. So yeah, it was all very, and my thinking wasn't right, because I remember like, oh gosh, it's my left leg. But it hadn't dawned on me that it was all on the same side. I know that sounds ridiculous now, but my mind, I just wasn't thinking clearly at all.
And what did you think was wrong? Did you have any kind of guess
I,
as to what was happening now?
no, I didn't have a clue. I had no idea. I was very, and still am really very ignorant about our health and our bodies and all of that. I've never really paid any attention to it, really. I had no idea at all.
So you were referred, and can you describe the kind of chain of events then at the hospital? What happened when you got there and what tests were carried out?
Yep. So I can't remember if they did a CT or not, but I can't remember. But they certainly did an MRI, and from the MRI, that was like in maybe the first or second day I was in hospital. And from that, then I remember a young doctor came in, and she pulled the curtains around my bed, you know, and she said, "Oh, the scans show that you've had a stroke." And because I'd had like so much worry with my mum with her breast cancer and dad with his heart, so my mind was in cancer and hearts. So when she said, "Oh, it's a stroke," I remember saying, "Well, what's a stroke?" I had no idea,
Right.
you know. So she explained, you know, that a stroke was just, you know, a bleed in the brain or a dry clot, is how she explained it.
Right.
You know, so that was that.
So it must have been absolutely terrifying when you heard
It
that news.
it was a shock. It was a shock, certainly, and of course in the brain as well. That's always like frightened me a bit more. You know,
Mhm.
if it's in your big toe or something, then I don't know, it seems further away. But in your brain, it's like there in your head, you
Well, it's
know.
quite an important organ.
Yeah, yes.
We need it, don't we?
Exactly.
So
I
this
quite
was,
appreciated it.
yeah. So this was sort of the sort of second or third day. How long were you in hospital?
In total, I was there for 2 months.
2 months.
2 months.
So what happened then with your symptoms over that time then?
Well, this is the thing, you see, because I actually walked into hospital and the ambulance came and I didn't want to get into a wheelchair. But I was 35 years old when this happened, you know, in 2005. So I didn't want to be in a wheelchair. So I remember saying to the ambulance man, no, I want to walk in. And he was like, okay then, because they have to accompany, or they had to then accompany you up to the ward, whatever. So yeah, so I walked in, and the first few days I was sort of walking around, but the left leg was then limping. It was dragging along the floor.
Mm-hmm.
So and my left arm was really heavy at that point as well. I could still just about move it a little bit, but it was so heavy. Gosh, it felt like tons and tons.
And
Mhm.
did that worsen over time?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was probably in the first week, maybe 2 weeks, that I realized, no, I can't do this anymore. I can't be carrying all this weight around, you know. And in fact, one night, I'd called a nurse in the middle of the night to go to the loo, and she said, "Oh no, you know, you have to use a commode." And I remember trying to say to her, I can't use a commode. I remember this sounds ridiculous, but I remember saying, "I'm only 35 years old. I can't use a commode." And she was really angry about it. She had
Angry.
no sympathy at all, at all, at all. Didn't understand where I was coming from. And I know it probably sounds silly to some people as well, but it was a big deal for me at the time.
Well, absolutely. I
You know?
mean, going through those symptoms and being told that you've had a stroke in your mid-30s, that's not what anybody expects.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
to actually process that, I mean, how
Yeah,
do you process something like that?
exactly. Yeah, yeah.
So were you able to, you said that the nurse said to use a commode. Did that mean that you just weren't able to walk, or were you able to actually get up, even just with assistance?
Well, I was, because I think that must have been why I called her in the first place, because I needed some help. So I could, like I say, I could walk. I mean, my right leg was fine, but of course, when you've got this tremendous weight on the other side, so my balance was off the pot. So looking back, it was a danger. I was a danger to myself. So that was why they sort of said, so after that night with the commode, when I refused, the next morning, another nurse came around and said, right, you can't go off to the loo on your own anymore. You have to call us for everything. And basically, they just said, yeah, it was too dangerous. And so, yeah, I had to call for everything, every time I needed to do anything at all,
I
I
suppose
had
just
to
for the,
call.
the risk of falling
Yeah, yeah.
was high.
Which now I'm in my normal head again. I understand why, but at the time, oh, it was hard.
Hard to accept, absolutely. And what about, I think you mentioned that your sight was affected as well. And to what sort of impact was that affected? What could you see?
Yeah. Well, that again, that because I was in the stroke unit, in the hospital. That was when they said about the commode and everything. And that really was the last straw for me. And it was maybe 2 or 3 days after that that I woke up one morning and just couldn't see it. I remember there was a big, on this wall here of the ward, it was all windows. So the light coming in was just absolutely, wow, it was just blinding. Like one of these really bright white lights that they have in concerts and stuff, you know, when the whole audience is blinded by it. That's what it was like. And my vision was all out of focus, so I couldn't see anybody or anything unless I could see a moving object, but I couldn't see what the object was. I could just see it was movement, you know. So yeah,
absolutely terrifying. So you weren't, not only were you going through the shock and fear of having been diagnosed with a stroke, but your symptoms were that bad and seemed to be worsening.
Yes. And to me, in my naive ignorance, I just assumed that this was my body giving up. You know, I sort of heard, I don't know, I've heard in the past that sometimes the body starts preparing to die. So I thought, oh, this is me, I'm dying now. My legs given up, my arms given up, my face was all drooped on this side. Yeah, and now my eyesight, I thought, this is it, I'm going to die. The thing is, though, Donna, everything was just so difficult and so horrible that the thought of death didn't even worry me. I was just sort of like, well, take me out of here now, because it's just horrific here.
It's just awful.
So,
what was and it's hard to kind of look back and sort of take each day at a time, but what do you think was the sort of emotional impact of the trauma of that, even just short term and long term?
Yeah, well, all I could think about was getting out of hospital.
Yeah.
And secondly, the other thing all I could think about was I didn't want my mum to be looking after me and for me to be a burden on her for the rest of my life and her life. So that was all I could think about, was I have to learn to walk and get out of here.
Right.
You know, it was that desperate need, though, because I did not want to be a burden on anybody.
So thinking of other people before yourself.
No, well, I think I was actually thinking of myself, having had such a strict upbringing.
Right.
The thought of going back to that.
Right.
Yes, it was me. I was being selfish then, because there's no way in hell I could have lived with her again.
No, I think that's quite understandable to feel that way. So you said you were in hospital then for like 2 months, it ended up being.
Yeah.
So with no idea of how much worse that your symptoms were going to get, how were your symptoms at the end of those 2 months versus when you first arrived?
So, like I say, I'd gone in, I could walk, but then after a few days or a week or something, I couldn't walk really. But I was, of course, given physiotherapy every day. So that was really helpful, actually. To be released from hospital, you have to have had, you have to have walked up so many steps, or taken so many steps walking as well. So that was my mission. Say it was 10 steps that you had to walk up. I was like, right, I've got to walk up 10 steps, then I can get out of here. The same with the walking. So it was basically, I seem to remember it was about a week before I actually left hospital that I could finally stand up, and I actually managed to walk a few steps.
And what about like prescription drugs? Was any medication administered?
No. No, it wasn't. But then towards the end of my stay, I remember the doctor coming in and saying, "Oh, have you taken your medication today?" And I said, "What medication? I haven't been given any medication." And I remember, and I couldn't see properly, but I could see her face going white, in shock. And the next day, I was then given statins, a diuretic, and aspirin.
Right. So these were...
Explain.
Well, yeah, aspirin would be to thin your blood, wouldn't it?
Right.
Diuretic would be to reduce your blood pressure, I assume.
Right. Yes.
And statins for cholesterol.
because those are the three things, or they were the three things that they give out to anybody who's had a stroke. So even though I was 35 only, and all my numbers and all that were okay, I was still given those three things to take.
But you got the impression that they'd forgotten to these should have been given to you earlier on.
Yes. Yeah. Well, but by the doctor's face,
it had been missed.
Yeah. To begin with, I did take them, and I was released, like I say, and I went home and I was taking them religiously, but then I didn't feel good. So I remember, just not feeling good in general. My body didn't feel good. I think if I remember rightly too, it probably made me constipated. It just wasn't, none of it was making me feel good at all. So I took the decision myself after, maybe it was a couple of months, I can't remember. I just thought, why am I doing this? Why am I still taking this? So the second I stopped, then I felt immediately better.
Right. So there must have been side effects from one, or even the combination of them weren't working for you.
Yeah.
And then with physical rehab, that I take it that carried on once you left hospital. Were you given like a program of physical rehabilitation?
No, that was it.
All stopped.
Yep, it stopped. Because, like I said, I'd been given it every day. I mean, I knew I'm, fairly intelligent. I knew what I could do. I had probably asked, what else can I do? Because I was always trying to get on to the next step. And, the main thing I did was just to go out walking, which is difficult when you can't see, of course, where you're going. But even just going round the block a few times, that, I just did it very, very gradually, day by day, a little bit more every day, just to practice walking.
Yeah. Just to build up
stamina. And strength.
So where did you find the strength then? When you've just been through such a kind of traumatizing experience, you've had that long in hospital. Were you seeing signs of improvement, and did that kind of give you the strength to keep going with your exercise and everything? Where did you find the strength to just get out for that walk every single day to make sure that you stuck with it? With it.
I think it was out of fear, quite frankly. Fear that I would be a burden on my mum. So that gave me the determination to just carry on, come hell or high water. You have to walk. You have to just, get your life back together again. Also at that point, I realized then if I couldn't see properly. So I had realized that I wouldn't be able to go back to my job. So I was worrying about what I was going to do in the future as well. And, they didn't know if I was going to walk again or see again or do anything again. So I just kind of thought, this is it. I have to just keep going and do the best I can, and start afresh, really.
Yeah. And just when you mentioned that fear, you would also have had the fear of having another stroke. Was that always playing on your mind as well, that, you can have another one?
Yeah, because I remember waking up when I was on those tablets to begin with. And waking up like at 2 a.m, like, oh, I've forgotten to take it. I'm going to have another stroke, Then once I stopped taking it all, then I don't know. By that point, I was definitely feeling a bit better already. So I think it just takes time just to realize, okay, I've woken up again today. I'm okay again, And of course, the better you feel as well from day to day. So
So you see your symptoms are improving, and more times passing from that original traumatic event. The trauma it never goes away, but it kind of softens a little bit, doesn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. The more distance you have from the event, I suppose. Yeah. Because it was 2 years later that I went back to do studying then. And so by that point, I was walking fairly well. I still had problems seeing where I was going, so I was tripping up quite a lot. But I had the strength to walk, for, I don't know, I could probably walk quite a lot, actually, maybe half an hour even.
Wow,
without,
that's massive.
It wasn't too horrific. I could do it.
Yeah. That's a huge change in that space of time.
Yeah.
from not being able to walk properly at all.
Exactly. Yeah.
So you said that you'd sort of left work and you went back to study.
Mm.
What did you go and do?
Oh, well, so this is when I started all of this training then. So I went to do psychology first. So when I was in hospital, I remember thinking, gosh, I can't go back to my job now. So what am I going to do? And the next morning I woke up and I thought, right, I've always been interested in the brain and how it works. So I thought, I'm going to go and do psychology. But I knew that I didn't want to be a psychologist. So I knew that I wanted to be a counsellor, even though I hadn't had counselling by that point. So in fact, yeah, but by the time I went, I had counselling. So that's what I did. I did my 4 years of psychology. And then I went down to Nottingham and did a master's in Cognitive Neuroscience and Neuroimaging.
Wow.
And then I did my degree in counselling.
Right, so another degree.
Yes, I know.
That's amazing.
Another
That's
bit of paper.
incredible. So all this time through uni then, I mean, that would have been the best part of like, what, 9 years?
Yeah.
9 years later, that would take us to about 2013?
2016, I think.
16.
Oh, I can't remember. Yeah.
So how did your symptoms kind of change over that whole time? Were you gradually improving?
Yeah. Yes, I was. It was very, very slow. Like I say, it was really slow. But also another part of this lovely story is that in my it was in my second year doing psychology, that I was talking with your mum when we were going up a mountain, and I was telling her about the doctor prescribing me the medication that I hadn't been taking anything at all until that point. And she said, "Oh, that sounds like medical negligence." So I went to a solicitor, and they were talking about medical negligence. And then when they got my medical notes from the hospital, the neuroscientist who sort of worked with the solicitor to get the medical facts together, he took a look at my scans from hospital and said, "Oh, this isn't a stroke at all. This is characteristic of MS, of multiple sclerosis." So that's actually, that was then a new diagnosis, if you like, because there was a while there that I was thinking, oh, I've had a stroke and I've got MS. That was a bit of trying to get my head around that.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yes, and of course with all that, like, oh, this is not good, and then I thought, actually, I haven't changed. I am still me, and I can still see what I can see. I can still do what I do before and after. So actually, the label doesn't matter at all. So that did me wonders. If it was a misdiagnosis, if it really is MS, whatever it is, it doesn't matter what label they put on it. I am as I am, and I'm doing the best I can.
Well, that's a good way of thinking of it. But what about at the time? What went through your mind when you heard that it was actually, it never had even been a stroke? It was MS.
Yeah. Well, you see, that was part of my reasoning as well, in a way. So at psychology, I learned a bit more about the brain, obviously. So when I knew where they'd seen in my brain where the white speck on the image was, and it was through that I realised that it's quite a normal mistake to make, because it was in my internal capsule in my brain in the middle somewhere. And that's a common place for strokes to happen. So of course they would have seen, it was just an image that they saw. There would have been white, I guess, on the image, and that they just put 2 and 2 together and said, "Oh, that's a stroke." But actually it's just a coincidence that that's where the MS hit my brain, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so it would sort of look, both the scans would look very similar for both conditions, basically.
Right.
So
exactly.
maybe a relatively easy mistake to make, but we expect doctors to know those things, don't we? That, especially the age you were, it's far less likely to be a stroke than, say, if you were in your 80s.
Right.
But anyway,
that was also another reason why I did. Sorry, why I did the master's, because that was specifically in neuroscience and neuroimaging. So then from there, it was even more clear, because now I understood, first of all, the images are not like photos of your brain. It is just a computer-made image. So it's just a whole lot of numbers and numbers and numbers, and then it all gets assembled, and then that's it. It is just an image. It's not a photo of your brain like people think. You know.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good place to reach, because I could understand. I think it would be quite human for someone to go through that and feel quite angry. It would be a normal human response, but it sounds like you've kind of made your peace with it.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Like I wasn't even angry to begin with. I don't think my brain was just working and processing normally. It really wasn't, you know. So I mean, it was a shock, obviously, you know, to hear a stroke and to hear MS. Oh gosh, you know. But I didn't feel. The only concern of mine was, how am I going to get out of here and what am I going to do next? That was it. You know. It sounds really narrow focused, but that's how I was. I just have to get out of here, and you know.
Yeah, and start getting better. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So from there, then, if you were now made aware that it was actually MS, did your treatment protocol change? Like, were you prescribed any medications at that point, or did you follow any kind of holistic therapies?
I followed nothing at all until your good self. I don't know when it was, maybe in 2015 or maybe, I don't know, when I kind of met you then. So I think before you'd also said to your mum about me trying the lecithin, the fat stuff. What's that?
Lecithin, yeah.
Right.
Lecithin.
And that did help, because I didn't even know about fat and all of that in your brain. I didn't know a thing. So that was you that got me started on that, which did help. And then in 2015, I think, is when you suggested about the sugar-free and, you know, giving up sugar and the ketogenic. That was the first thing, wasn't it? So yes, because I'd already given up gluten by that point. I do remember that. And then yes, so when I finally was able to give up sugar, which was really hard, as you know. I was a real chocoholic, honestly. I liked my chocolate every day, I tell you.
Don't we all?
But yes, that was the main thing to me. Because if you remember as well, it was in 2005 that I first went into hospital. So I couldn't feel my fingertips of my left hand. So they had got better with time, but they were still quite numb. The fingertips themselves were pretty numb still. So, and I'd also heard about nerve atrophy, you know, when your nerves they're not being used or whatever, that they all, you know, atrophy.
Kind of waste, yeah.
Right. So, and that's it. It can't come back. So I've kind of given up on my fingertips, to be quite honest. And also that's my left hand, which, as you know, I used to play the violin. Yeah. So that was just heartbreaking. That was the heartbreaking bit for me, that I couldn't play my violin, because that had been like my life, you know. Yeah. Not that I wasn't great or anything at it, but I just really loved it. I loved playing, you know. So that has been a huge loss to me. Sure. So, but literally, I think it was about a week, if that. It might have even been 5 days of going completely no sugar at all. And I'm telling you now, after 5 days, maybe 7, but I think 5, I could feel my fingertips after having had 10 years of numbness.
Wow.
Wow, indeed.
That is amazing, isn't it?
It was. After all the information, oh no, it's nerve atrophy, you'll never get it back, blah, blah, you know. And then honestly, it was amazing. Mm-hmm. And now I still appreciate that I can feel my fingertips.
Yeah. That's amazing. I mean, quitting sugar, obviously it's a kind of positive health move for anyone, but you specifically kind of stuck to sort of a very low sugar or low carb, but quite high fat diet.
Yes, yeah. So I cut sugar. Sugar was a big, I had no idea it was so toxic, but it must be, again, my master's, I think, or maybe even the psychology, can't remember. that sugar is toxic to your neurons. So, and that's true. I mean, since giving it all up, there have been a few times when I've said, oh, what the heck, I'll have a glass of wine, or I'll have a Bacardi and Coke, whatever. And I have had some sugar, or a cake or something, I've had a sugar, and my brain notices immediately when I've had sugar. My brain doesn't work properly. It's all foggy again. It's so quick, But when you're used to consuming sugar day in, day out, you sort of just, I don't know, your body must get used to it, but to suddenly go back onto sugar just as a little tester, it plays havoc with my whole system.
Yeah, you're maybe particularly sensitive to it now as well. But that probably does you a favour, because when you have sugar, you immediately notice the difference, so that it will be a one-off. Exactly. Whereas if you didn't get that, you might start kind of consuming more of it again. So it probably does you a favour.
Exactly. Yes, I would be consuming more. Definitely, yeah. Because a lot of people say that, how can you still be on no sugar? And that's why, because it's so horrific. When I've had some sugar, of course I'm not going to go back.
But your tastes change as well, don't they? Like, it's amazing how, I mean, I used to always love sugar, and I kind of moved away from it. But now, even just by accident, if I have something that's got sugar in it, it tastes horribly sweet, whereas previously I would have really liked that. But your tastes definitely do change. So what foods specifically, if you can give some examples, what were the kind of foods that you cut right down, and what higher fat foods did you have more of?
Yeah, so obviously, all the nice stuff that we all love, all the sweets and cake and chocolate and all of that, and all the carby stuff as well. So I'd already given up bread. But yeah, I did like, croissant and cakes and that sort of stuff. But I can make my own now without all the sugar. So exactly. I'm getting there. I'm not eating bread or anything, but
yeah, you don't have to kind of cut it out completely, do you? You can make healthier alternatives. You just have to be a bit imaginative.
Exactly, yes. But again, your taste buds change to it, don't they? And quite good. And definitely with the high fat as well. So one thing I will say is that my whole life, because I've always been big, so I've always been on a low fat, high sugar or high processed kind of diet. And I think personally that's probably why I was ill in the first place as well.
Yeah, I can understand that.
So definitely having, I always had olive oil, but having proper good fat. So avocado, all the good oils,
coconut oil.
Coconut oil. It's just good fat, isn't it? Good, healthy fat.
Yeah, because it's that mistake that a lot of people make, and even the government guidelines, we all remember that kind of triangle, don't we, with the carbs at the bottom, all your grains and bread and everything, and then this little space at the top for fats. But people make the mistake that by eating fat, it makes you fat. But fat, I mean, it makes up every cell membrane in your body. It coats all your nerves, which is really important for MS. Your brain is mostly made of fat. Yeah. So if you eat less fat or eat very little fat, then obviously these processes and these like physiological structures are gonna suffer.
Yeah. It makes perfect sense when you understand it properly, doesn't it?
Nutritionally, yeah, absolutely. So you had adjusted your diet. You literally kind of turned your diet upside down, didn't you? You kind of flipped it the other way around. And what about like vitamin supplements? Did you take any specific supplements as well as part of your kind of dietary changes?
Yeah, well, again, I didn't until you came along. So now I take vitamin D, of course. I take that in a high dosage. I think I'm on about 5,000 IUs, I think it is.
Yep.
And that must be taken with K2. This is like a little challenge to me to see if I'm getting this right now, isn't it? You're the person that's told me to take all of this. Do I remember why I'm taking them? Oh, I don't know. So vitamin D and K2 together. Yep.
Do you take any like omega-3? Omega-3
fats? And omega-3 as well, yes. And magnesium, I take, you've just reminded me. Magnesium 3-on-8 is the one, I think. Yep. Vitamin C as well. Vitamin B12 and B complex.
Complex, good.
Vitamin A as well.
Okay, so you've talked about your physical symptoms and your physical healing, as well as how this whole experience has impacted you emotionally. What about spiritually? Like, I mean, are you kind of a religious or spiritual person, and has this experience brought about any change or development in you spiritually?
Yes, it has. I wasn't religious at all. I wasn't spiritual at all. But again, going back to me being in hospital, when I woke up that morning and suddenly couldn't see anything, and I thought, oh, this is me, I'm going to die. And I went to bed that night, and I actually prayed, not even knowing if there was a God or anything to pray to. But I thought, this is me, I'm going to die, I'm going to pray. And I prayed that night. And I woke up in the morning knowing in my heart that it wasn't my time to die just now.
Right.
So yes. So ever since then, that's been another aspect of me that has changed hugely, because I do have my spiritual stuff now,
Right.
which I'm sure has also helped. Well, I know it has helped me heal a lot.
Yeah, and a lot of people say that, don't they, when they've been through some particularly traumatizing life event, or they've been through some element of suffering. Often that's what does bring you closer to God, or you kind of discover more about yourself spiritually.
Exactly. Yeah. It always takes something that we perceive to be bad, and then actually it turns out to be a good thing, doesn't it? Because I look back now and I'm really grateful that I was ill. I'm a far happier person now than I ever was before. I went from, I was quite miserable. I really didn't like my mother. I was just angry with the world. Everything was rubbish, But now I appreciate every step I walk, because I could have been in a wheelchair for the rest of my life, So I'm really grateful for that, really grateful. I go to the gym, I do a bit of dancing, all these things, and I just love it. Not because I'm great at any of it at all, but I love it because I can do some of it,
So everything is put into perspective, isn't it?
Exactly. Yeah. So that's been the biggest gift, because I'm actually happy. I'm a happy person in general, yeah.
So anyone going through what you've been through would understandably be fearful, angry, resentful, even grief-stricken, at the life that you've potentially lost. How, over all that time, how did you work through that? What did you do to kind of get to this point where you no longer take your life for granted? You don't have that resentment anymore. You actually appreciate life as it is, and you don't want to go back to life as it was. Is there anything that you did specifically emotionally or spiritually to actually work through that to get to where you are now?
Yes. Well, this has been the other major thing that's changed in my life, because I was aware in hospital that yes, we had physiotherapy, which was fantastic to help our physical symptoms, but we didn't ever get any help up here with our mental health, and I really struggled. I was pretty suicidal really for quite a long time, just at the thought of being a burden. So I went to go and see a counsellor, and was able to share my tale of my childhood, my mum, all of the stuff that had been weighing heavily on me. And that was another massive key thing. So I sort of made a promise to myself then that I need to go and be a counsellor and help people who are in that kind of situation. And I still feel very strongly about it even now, we need some help with how to process these things.
It's something that's very much lacking in conventional medicine, isn't it? That everything is about treating people, well, usually managing symptoms with pharmaceutical drugs, but they neglect to help people emotionally, especially the people who have gone through some kind of health crisis or trauma, the people who've been diagnosed with some serious condition or chronic illness.
Yeah.
I mean, I can vouch for that as well. I didn't receive any emotional support or counselling, which means that the patient themselves has to then, first of all, realise that it's something that they need, because you don't always realise that at the time, and then source it yourself. And you took it one step further, that you decided to actually go into that line of work, which is also, you hear of that quite a lot. People, once they've gone through this suffering, they now, because you've been through it, you know what it's like. And every counsellor, you expect every counsellor to have empathy, but you have a real empathy because you've actually been through it. So did you work with a counsellor?
I've worked with many counsellors.
You've had different ones over time, right?
Yeah. And of course, during my training as well, we had to have counsellors all the time too.
It's part of your course.
So I've had years of counselling, and I could probably go on forever, probably, being counselled. But I mean, I enjoy it, and I'm quite an introspective person anyway, so. But people do need it. I agree. People in hospital who have been diagnosed with whatever, they need some mental help, really, to get around it,
Yeah, and even just for healing, because even like looking at any chronic illness or cancer, there's so much research that's coming out now that shows, if you think of the work of Gabor Mate, it shows that stress and sort of childhood traumas contribute to illness. So if we know that emotional traumas contribute to illness, you have to heal them, or you won't move on, you won't heal. Coming to the present day then, how is your health? How would you describe your health now? Do you think that over all these years you've continually improved? Where would you say you're at now in terms of your health and well-being?
Well, I can certainly walk for days probably now on the old legs. They're working pretty well most of the time. I give them lots of practice on a daily basis, and I also rest. So that's part of it as well, I think, is recognizing. I remember one of the nurses in the hospital saying that, you have a certain battery, so you have to be careful, because if you use all your battery, if you use 90% of your battery within the first hour of the day, then you're going to be completely wiped out for the rest of the day. And that was true. I'd never thought about it like that. So it's taken a long time, but now I know, okay, no, I'm too tired now, so I'm not going to, do whatever. I listen to my body. I think it's all about being in connection with your body, which I wasn't at all. It's being in connection with it and listening to it, because it knows what it needs. If you just listen to it.
Absolutely. And rest is so important. Like, I think a lot of us, when we're resting, there's that inner voice that says, oh, you're being lazy. But you have to make sure that you fit rest in, because it's as important as being active.
Yeah, absolutely. And sleep as well. It's crucial.
So what are your symptoms now then? Would you say, like, if are you left with any kind of residual symptoms that kind of come and go? Is there anything remaining?
Well, yes, so my legs are good. I can walk on that. My arms are pretty good too. I can usually do everything. This is still a little bit spastic in my left hand. So as you know, I've been trying to play my violin again. So I can now feel the strings, to put my fingers on the strings. They can sometimes remember where to go on the strings, but what they can't do is the vibrato bit that makes it sound nice. So it's just they still sort of go a bit spastic at times. If I forget to concentrate on it, then it can do its own thing. But it's definitely still getting better, just very, very slowly. My eyesight has also improved quite a lot. I can certainly read for much longer now.
So what about then? So you did your psychology degree, and then you went on and you did a whole degree in humanistic counselling?
Humanistic counselling, yeah.
So I take it then from there you've gone into counselling. What is it you do now in terms of your counselling work? Do you have any specialties? What are your kind of areas of expertise?
So yes, I am a counsellor now, and I specialise in narcissistic abuse, because I feel like I have known many narcissistic people in my childhood and since then. So yes, I now devote my life to narcissistic abuse. So you mentioned Gabor Mate a minute ago, and like you say, his work on the childhood, the effects of childhood on the the immune system, that he's got it bang on. There's a knowing, isn't there? I knew inside when I read his book, I knew that was exactly it. I knew when I was in hospital that's what had caused my immune system or my whatever to not work. I knew it was because of all the stress that I'd been through. So that's why I devote my time to that now. I think the whole narcissism word is definitely getting out into the world now. I don't know if it's always accurately used. I feel it's kind of getting thrown around all over the place. Oh, he's a narcissist, she's a narcissist, but it's good that we're becoming more aware of that, so that we can finally, help people to get through it.
So you specialise in narcissistic abuse. What other areas of interest do you have?
So many narcissistic abuse, also of course illness, neurological problems, difficulties, all of that. Just because I have a vague understanding of it, I've done a lot of training in these areas,
like brain injury and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
It just makes a big difference when you've been through it yourself. I think as a counsellor can do any amount of learning and training and reading all these textbooks and taking exams, but I think once you've actually been through it yourself and you've been through the suffering, you understand the suffering. You can empathise in a completely different way. So and that's the case for you, not just with your journey through illness, but also you mentioned sort of the narcissistic abuse that you've been through. So you're well positioned.
That's what a lot of clients say. They say it's such a relief to talk to somebody else who understands what it's like to be, in narcissistic abusive relationship.
Well, today's interview, it was to hear all about your personal story of strength going through your illness and your healing journey, and it's a very inspiring story, so thanks for sharing.
Oh, thank you.
And I just want to mention, I'm pleased to say that you're going to actually come back more in a counsellor capacity. So today you're kind of a patient talking about your healing journey, but you're going to come back in a counsellor capacity, and we're going to look a little bit more at the topic of narcissistic abuse, chronic illness and all that stuff in more detail. So I look forward to that. But just before we finish up, for anyone else in the same position as you were, perhaps having been misdiagnosed or diagnosed with MS or any chronic illness for that matter, obviously you can't advise on any specific treatments, but if you had the chance to kind of talk to your younger self, if you could go back in time, what would you say now that you've how have you learned from your experience? Is there anything that you kind of wish you knew back then? Is there anything that you would have done differently, do you think?
Yeah, I think just being in touch again with your own body and listening to it, what it needs and what it just knows what it needs, and that's that. I sort of, when it was in hospital, just thinking that the doctors know everything and they know better than I do about my own body, but actually I don't believe that anymore. I know my own body. I'm a bit more careful with what I interpret from the doctors. I don't necessarily take what they say as the absolute facts.
And it's important never to accept a doctor's prognosis, isn't it?
Right.
Because you can listen to what a doctor has to say, listen to what, the test results and everything, listen to their recommendations. But, even in your case, it's a specific example of doctors can be wrong. Doctors can make mistakes.
Absolutely.
So it's a good idea to always listen to what they have to say, but they're not always 100% correct. Mistakes are still made. They're still human.
It could have been, Donna, that I listened to the doctor, because I remember one of them said, oh, well, we don't know if you can walk again or you'll see again, So if I had been a different person, I might well have just given up the hope of living. I could have just jumped out the window, quite honestly, and killed myself, So, yes, I definitely think listen to it, like you say, listen to it, but then listen to your own body as well.
And it's also it's important to kind of keep hold of your autonomy, because at the end of the day, we are the owners of our bodies. Yeah. It's not for anyone else, no matter how expert and how qualified they are. They don't have the final decision.
Yeah,
we're the owners of our body. We decide at the end of the day. We can listen to all the advice from all these qualified people, but it's owning your body, isn't it? It's having autonomy over your health decisions.
Yeah.
So you're in a good place now.
I am indeed, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm happy.
Where can people find you? So if there's anyone out there who is looking for counselling after chronic illness or anything to do with narcissistic abuse, and somebody wants to reach out to you, can we put your email in the description?
Yes.
Is that the best way to get in touch with you?
Yes.
Well, thank you for your time.
Oh,
it's been great to talk to you.
Yes, it's been nice. It's been nice talking about me.
Yeah, you won't be used to that, will you?
I know. It just makes me laugh because I specialise in narcissistic abuse, and here I am talking about me.
Great. Right. Well, we'll catch up soon. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye. Bye.